What happened to Devin Williams? We're going to get right into it. But before we do, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any videos in the future. Also, we have a second channel where a bunch of additional content will be going up regularly, so make sure you check that out. Also, the Substack is live. You can subscribe to it for free and get a weekly newsletter keeping you up to date on everything we are making over here. Or if you choose to support monetarily, you get a direct DM to me, early access to videos, and a bunch of other goodies. So thank you in advance for supporting. So let's go figure out what's wrong with Devin. You may know him as the man that finally changed the Yankees' facial hair policy, but for most, he was seen as one of the most reliable closers in the league, and for good reason. From 21 to 24, especially after moving into the closing role for the Milwaukee Brewers, after the abrupt trading of Josh Hader in 2022, he compiled 68 saves and 49 holds, putting up a combined 1.95 ERA and holding hitters to a measly 152 batting average against. And he was dominant, 361 Ks in 222 innings. That's absolutely ridiculous. 2025 has been a different story, though. If you don't believe me, just ask a Yankees fan. The drop-off in performance like this, without an injury or obvious change in stuff, is exceedingly rare. Fortunately, I was also a reliever and have a lot of experience in figuring out why I sucked so bad. So I went and looked around for a smoking gun that could possibly explain the reason for Williams' poor performance this year. And I think I found it. What happened to Devin Williams? So this is becoming a regular occurrence here on the channel, and I'm developing a little bit of a checklist that I go through when I'm trying to determine what is going on. This is especially true when I'm looking at guys who are very dominant and then they are suddenly not dominant. A slow decline is usually easier to explain, but the abrupt change in performance, it's usually harder to find. First, is he tipping? As we know from my Helsley video from about a week ago, usually a drop-off of performance has a big indicator of some sort of tip. Now, I went and looked at a bunch of pitches from Devin, especially around the time where things were going really poorly, and I couldn't really find anything. He has some mechanical stuff that it seems like he does very purposely so that he doesn't tip. He pins his hands to his body. He doesn't tap overly obviously when he does certain pitches over others, and there's really no negative space between his glove and his body or any other thing he does where you could key in on that as a hitter. So then question 2 becomes, is he in any obvious patterns? Because Devin Williams is a 2-pitch pitcher, fastball and changeup. When you only throw 2 pitches, no matter how nasty they are, the minimum approach a hitter can have against you is flip a coin. They can guess right. And if you get into certain patterns, for example, relying heavily on one of those 2 pitches in a very specific count to a right-handed or left-handed hitter, that can be something that's very easily keyed on. But I went and looked at that as well. If anything, they have moved more towards a 50-50 choice in every count to both sides of the plate. He was probably more predictable the last 2 years than he was this year. And that is probably a response to early struggles this year. He moved more towards that 50-50 so he could eliminate this predictability thing. So he's passed the first 2 questions with flying colors for the most part. The third one I ask is his command and is his stuff about the same? Is everything moving the way he wants it? And is he generally putting the ball where he normally puts the ball? Long story short, there is a few things here, but there's nothing like massive, like a pitch just simply isn't good anymore. Both pitches are still elite by a lot of metrics, though there has been some regression. So the first thing I noticed was his 4-seam has entered what I call the dead zone territory. When you are throwing a 4-seam, especially if you are a 2-pitch pitcher, you want it to ride. You want it to defy gravity as long as possible. He's never been a super high ride guy, but it has fallen enough down about an inch since 2023 that it has gotten into the league average territory, meaning hitters predict how much a ball is going to drop. His is dropping about that much. This coincides with some horizontal movement. His horizontal movement has increased by 2 inches. Now, normally that would sound like a good thing, but with your 4-seam fastball, you don't want a ton of horizontal because it creates 2 planes of movement that hitters can track more easily. Basically, the more you get into the dead zone, the more the ball moves the way that hitters expect it to. So to counteract that, you have to throw really hard. Unfortunately, his 4-seam fastball is down about a half mile an hour over that same 2-year period. In a vacuum, the 4-seam isn't quite as good as it was before, but it was never really his best pitch anyways. It was always just an above average pitch, and now it's more around average, so that doesn't really explain everything. The changeup, or the airbender, is the thing that he relies on the most and has been his calling card for his whole career. And that pitch is also moving a little bit differently. The velo has dropped about a third a mile an hour. Not huge, and it's a changeup, so it's not a big deal. But the vert has dropped 3 inches, which in most cases, you would say more movement is better. Except when you throw a changeup that is going the same speed, when it moves more, that means it's probably starting to break earlier. So if you throw 2 pitches, you want them to tunnel, meaning you want them to look the same for as long as possible before they deviate. If you are getting 3 inches more of drop on a changeup, but the velocity is about the same, that means that deviation is happening earlier in the path. When that happens, a little bit easier to adjust to mid-flight, especially when it's in the low 80s. It's a slow changeup. And we've seen, especially recently, he's given up a couple hits on pitches well below the zone that he'd never given up before on that changeup. Yes, these pitches are behaving slightly differently, which means he probably can get away with mistakes a little bit less. But we're talking about 5-10% less effective. That's not enough to explain why his ERA is triple what it's been for his whole career.
Let's talk about your virtual private network. Do you have one? You should have one. And Eric Kratz, take it away, because you're someone that definitely had your fair share of protection when you were playing on the field, because you were a catcher and you did not want to get hit by a baseball, which I think Surfshark can help you do in the online world when you're on the road.
It's a chest protector, face mask, and shin guards for your network.
Look at you with your baseball analogy, Kratz. Go to surfshark.com/FOUL or use code FOUL at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. A risk-free 30-day money-back guarantee is there for you. And you can secure your digital life with Surfshark VPN by hitting that link below for an extra 4 months of Surfshark. Don't let online threats catch you off guard. This has been your tech update. Keep your data safe and take control of your online security with Surfshark today.
So what about command? Because that also has something to do with it. Where is he throwing the pitches and how well is he doing it consistently? So one thing you need to know about Devin is he is a high walk guy in general. He's about 10% walk rate for his career, and the league average is about 8.5 because of the movement on his pitches. Like, he's able to get a lot of chase, a lot of swing and miss, and it really hasn't hurt him up until this point. This year it seems to. Now, if we look at the location graphs here, that we have 23, 24, and 25, he generally gets them to the same spots. One difference in 2025 is some of those misses are higher in the zone for the changeup and lower in the zone for the fastball. He's just missing more in the meat of the plate in general. Not a ton more, just a little bit more. As a reliever, you just need to give up 3, 4, 5 extra hard hit balls in those spots to really change the trajectory of your year. The command, again, just like the stuff, it's probably degraded 5 or 10%, but these things start to compound over time. And this explains that's not quite enough to explain going from being elite to bad. Let's dig just a little bit deeper. So one thing that stayed pretty consistent is his strikeout rate. He's still striking out a ton of guys, but his batting average on balls put in play, when the ball is hit, the percentage of time that it is a hit, that number is way above his career average. So in general, 2-pitch pitchers with a 4-seam as their fastball tend to give up more fly balls, and they tend to strike out a lot of guys. So if you strike out a ton of batters, your batting average on balls put in play is generally higher because there's less overall pitches being put in play. So for example, if a sinker guy gives up 40 hits on the year, but there was 200 balls put in play, that's a 200 BABIP. That's really good. If another guy goes and gives up those same 40 hits, but only allows 120 balls put in play, now that BABIP is 333. That's how these things can skew. He's a fly ball guy, but his BABIP has been well below average for his whole career. Now that could be luck, but most of the time it's related to defense. Defense, the Yankees do not have. That is a big issue. So let's compare the Brewers and the Yankees over the last 3 years. The Yankees are ranked 19th in infield outfield run save with -9 this year. In comparison, the Brewers finished last year in 3rd with 53 and 1st in 2023 with 86. The same shows up on Fangraphs for outs above average. Currently, the Yankees are 20th in 2025. Milwaukee, 3rd in 2024 and 1st in 2023. Milwaukee just has a much better defensive core. The Yankees have improved with the addition of Ryan McMahon at 3rd. Jazz Chisholm has been above average at 2nd, and Aaron Judge has been above average even though his arm isn't really working, and Trent Grisham is known as a great defensive center fielder. Where the issue issues arise are at the places you probably guessed. Up the middle, Anthony Volpe is a -9, and Jason Dominguez in the left field is a -9. And those two guys seem to be in on a lot of plays for Devin Williams. It's things that he used to count on, he cannot count on defensively. It's just the nature of how they are put together. And there is a little bit of bad luck because I just mentioned there are plenty of good defensive players on the Yankees. There's just a couple outliers that are really not great this year. And those guys have gotten a lot of play when Devin Williams is pitching. So this whole picture is painted most clearly since August 1st. Since that point, the guy's got a 6.14 ERA. That is giving up 2 runs in every 3 innings. Not great. Over that same time period, though, he has struck out 41.8% of the batters he's faced and has a BABIP of 357. A couple misses turning into home runs, like in the Texas series, but there's a few other plays that are softly hit ground balls into holes. One of the big issues is he has only 2 pitches, and having only 2 pitches puts you in a position that if one of them stops being really effective or both, things can go downhill really fast. Also, it's very hard to just add a nasty pitch in the middle of the year, especially when you are a leverage guy and you just put it into the game. That is something that is harder to do than you would think. And with the scrutiny in New York, you can't just go out there and test a pitch. The leash is just going to be shorter. It's going to be shorter than it was in Milwaukee. The scrutiny is just not the same, and it makes making adjustments harder to decide to do. You usually tend to stick to what you've been doing and hope that things kind of even out a little bit because that's what happens in baseball, and that just has not worked for Devin. In conclusion, without a tip and without really being really predictable in any glaring way that can be fixed from one day to the other, it just comes down to execution. Because his stuff is a little bit different and his execution has been 5 or 10% worse, that is going to mean that he's giving up higher quality contact, even if he's still striking out people. Also, it just takes a couple guys hitting pitches that are put in good spots to then make you lose a little bit of confidence in those pitches. But his season is just a classic example of what it's like to be a reliever. A couple more mistakes, a couple misplaced balls that aren't touched and they're called hits could be the difference between a 2.5 and a 5 ERA. And at the end of the day, that's all anyone watching really cares about. You add in everyone trying to figure out what's wrong with you all the time. It adds a little bit more pressure, sometimes makes things that need to have a little bit more patience attached to them harder to do. They need a dialed in Milwaukee Brewers version of Devin Williams if they want to go deep in the playoffs. And I think everyone would feel a little bit better if that's what we said.